Everyone who's ever looked into switching to Linux has had the same moment. You're sitting there, reading through the forums, watching the videos, going through the documentation, and somewhere along the way, an invisible assumption creeps in. You start thinking about it like it's a breakup, like using Linux means ending things with Windows permanently, dramatically, no going back. And here's the thing. That assumption stops more people from ever trying Linux than any technical barrier ever has. So let me say this clearly, right at the start. You don't have to ditch Windows to use Linux. You can run both at the same time on the same machine. And the fact that this feels like a surprise to you right now is exactly the problem this video exists to solve. The Linux community is passionate, genuinely passionate. And that passion has built something incredible, a free, open, powerful operating system that millions of people use every day. But that same passion has also shaped how Linux gets talked about. And somewhere in that conversation, a very specific framing took over. Linux adoption started getting presented as a migration story, a departure story. Windows is the old life you leave behind. Linux is the new life you arrive at. And somewhere in the middle, there's this dramatic crossing over moment where you make the leap. That framing makes for a great story. It really does. It has a compelling arc, it has emotional stakes, and it maps perfectly onto how enthusiastic Linux users actually feel about their own experience. But for someone who's just curious, someone who's heard about Linux, maybe gotten frustrated with Windows, maybe seen one too many forced updates or privacy policy changes, that framing is a wall, not a door. Because the question stops being, should I try Linux? And starts being, am I ready to commit to Linux? And those are completely different questions with completely different answers. Most people aren't ready to commit to an entirely new operating system on day one. They have workflows, tools, files, habits. They have software their job depends on, or games they don't want to lose access to, or just a general sense that blowing up their entire computing setup is not something they're prepared to do on a Tuesday afternoon because some video made a compelling case. That's not fear, that's reasonable risk assessment. And the migration framing punishes that reasonable caution by presenting it as the only available path. The truth is, there's a completely different path, one that doesn't require you to blow anything up, one that lets you explore Linux slowly, practically, and on your own terms, with Windows still sitting right there, intact, ready to use the moment you need it. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how that path works, step by step, with honest assessments of what each option gets you and what each one costs. Let's start with the most committed option of the three, but don't let that scare you. It's still not what the migration story describes. Dual booting is the setup where your single computer runs two operating systems, Windows on one partition of your drive, Linux on another, and every time you power on, a simple menu appears asking which one you want to load. That's it. Windows is still there, completely untouched, living on its own slice of your hard drive. You haven't deleted anything, you haven't replaced anything, you've added something. Setting this up is more straightforward than it sounds, but it does require a few specific steps. And I want to walk you through them honestly, rather than just waving my hand and saying, it's easy, just do it. The first thing you're going to do is carve out some space on your hard drive for the Linux installation. You do this through Windows' own built-in disk management tool. Open it up, right-click your main partition, and select Shrink Volume. Windows will calculate how much space it can safely free up, and you'll tell it how much to take. For a comfortable Linux installation, with room to install applications and store some files, you want somewhere between 40 and 60 gigabytes. 20 is the bare minimum if you're really tight on space, but you'll feel that constraint quickly. The space you free up becomes what disk management calls unallocated. Empty storage sitting next to your Windows partition, waiting. Next, you choose a Linux distribution. This sounds more intimidating than it is. A distribution, or distro, is just a packaged version of Linux. Same core, different presentation. For someone doing their first exploration, the two names that come up most consistently for good reason are Ubuntu and Linux Mint. Both of them have installers that walk you through the process with clear language. Both of them handle hardware detection automatically for most common setups. And both of them have desktop environments that won't require you to relearn where everything is from scratch. The learning curve is there, but it's not a cliff. You download the distribution as an ISO file, use a free tool like Rufus or Balena Etcher to write it onto a USB drive, restart your computer, boot from that USB drive, and follow the installer. When it asks where to install, you point it at that unallocated space you created. The installer handles the rest, including setting up the boot manager that will show you the operating system selection menu on future startups. From that point on, every time you start your computer, you choose Linux today, Windows today. The choice is yours at every boot. One environment doesn't know the other exists, they don't interfere with each other, and if you decide after 3 months that Linux isn't for you, you can remove the Linux partition and reclaim that storage. Nothing about your Windows installation was ever at risk. The one genuine friction point with dual booting is that switching between environments requires a restart. You can't be using Windows, realize you want to try something in Linux, and switch over without rebooting. For some people, in some use cases, that's a minor inconvenience. For others, developers who need Linux tools, but work primarily in Windows applications, it's a meaningful workflow disruption. Which is exactly why the second pathway exists. Virtual machines solve the restart problem by running Linux inside Windows as a regular application. You open your virtualization software, launch your Linux virtual machine, and a Linux desktop appears in a window on your Windows desktop. You can have a Windows application open on one side of your screen and a full Linux environment on the other. No restart, no switching, no choosing. Both operating systems running simultaneously on the same hardware. The software that makes this happen for free, genuinely completely free, is VirtualBox. It's an open source virtualization platform that you install like any other Windows application. Download it from the VirtualBox website, run the installer, and you've got a virtual machine manager sitting in your applications folder. From there, you create a new virtual machine using the built-in wizard, which walks you through naming your VM, telling it what operating system you're installing, allocating RAM and processor cores from your host system, and creating a virtual hard drive file. Then you attach your Linux ISO, the same file you'd use for a dual boot, and start the VM. It boots from the ISO, you run through the installer, and a few minutes later, you have a fully functional Linux environment running in a window. Here's the honest part, because I said I'd be honest about all of this. Virtual machines have a performance ceiling that native installations don't. When Linux runs inside VirtualBox, it's running on virtualized hardware. VirtualBox is translating your Linux operating system's requests and handing them to the real hardware underneath. That translation layer adds overhead. On a modern machine with decent RAM and a multi-core processor, that overhead is often barely noticeable for general use, browsing the web, writing code, using the terminal, running typical applications. But for anything computationally intensive, video rendering, 3D graphics, heavy compilation workloads, you'll feel the difference compared to running the same workload natively. The other thing to know about virtual machines is that they share resources. If you allocate 4 gigabytes of RAM to your Linux VM and 8 to Windows, you're splitting your 12 gigabytes. If your machine only has 8 gigabytes total, you're dividing an already limited pool. VMs work best on machines with 12 or more gigabytes of RAM because you can give each environment enough to breathe. On a machine with 8 gigabytes, you'll want to be thoughtful about what you're running simultaneously. But here's what the virtual machine gives you that dual booting can't. Complete workflow continuity. Your Linux environment and your Windows environment coexist in the same session. You can copy text from a Linux terminal and paste it into a Windows document. You can have a Linux development environment building your project, while your Windows email client sits open in the background. The integration isn't perfect. Graphics performance inside a VM will never match native. But for exploration purposes, and for many professional workflows, it's more than sufficient. If dual booting feels like too much of a commitment and a full virtual machine feels like more setup than you want to deal with right now, there's a third option. That's even lower friction, and it lives entirely inside Windows with no separate installation at all. It's called the Windows Subsystem for Linux, and Microsoft built it directly into Windows 10 and 11 as a feature you can enable through your system settings. What WSL gives you is a genuine Linux command line environment, running natively inside Windows, accessible through the Windows terminal. You open a terminal, window, type a command, and you're working in Linux. The Linux file system is there. The Linux package manager is there. You can install Linux command line tools and run them with native performance. No virtualization overhead, because WSL doesn't emulate hardware. It runs Linux binaries directly on the Windows kernel through a compatibility layer Microsoft built specifically for this. To enable it, you open Windows PowerShell as an administrator and type a single command, but WSL install. Windows handles the rest. It downloads and installs WSL2, which is the current version, and a default Linux distribution, typically Ubuntu. Restart once, and you have a Linux terminal available anytime you open the Windows terminal. The whole process takes maybe 15 minutes and requires zero technical expertise beyond following those instructions. The honest limitations here matter too, because WSL is a specific tool for specific purposes, and it gets oversold in both directions. On the enthusiastic side, it gets presented as a complete Linux solution, which it isn't. WSL is fundamentally a command line environment. Running graphical Linux desktop applications through WSL requires additional configuration. Microsoft's WSLG feature enables this partially, but it's not the same as a full Linux desktop environment. The Linux desktop experience, the look, the feel, the application launcher, the file manager, the whole graphical ecosystem is not what WSL gives you. If your goal is to explore Linux as a desktop operating system, WSL will show you the engine room but not the bridge. On the dismissive side, Linux purists sometimes wave off WSL as not being real Linux, which undersells it significantly for the people it actually serves. If you're a developer who wants to run Linux command line tools, write shell scripts, use the Linux version of development utilities, work with Linux package managers, and do that without leaving your Windows workflow, WSL is genuinely excellent at all of those things. It's not a compromise for those use cases. It's a capable native solution. So here's how these three options fit together as a progression, because you don't have to pick just one and stick with it. Think of them as stages you move through as your familiarity grows and your sense of what you want from Linux becomes clearer. You start with WSL, enable it through Windows settings, spend a week or two just opening the terminal and poking around. Learn how Linux file paths work. Use apt or whatever package manager your distribution includes to install a tool and watch it work. Get comfortable with the basic navigation, ls to list files, cd to move around, mkdir to create a folder. None of this is difficult, and the familiarity you build in this stage pays forward to everything that comes after. The Linux command line uses the same conventions everywhere. In WSL, in a virtual machine, in a dual boot setup, on a server you might administer someday. Time spent here is never wasted. After you've got some command line comfort, move to a virtual machine, install VirtualBox, set up a Linux VM, and start exploring the graphical desktop environment. This is where Linux starts to feel like a real operating system rather than a text-based tool. You'll discover how the application ecosystem works, what software is available, what the workflow feels like for everyday tasks. You'll also encounter the places where things work differently than Windows. And having your Windows environment right there, literally right there in another window, means you can look things up, cross-reference, and figure things out without being stranded. This stage typically takes a few weeks before it starts feeling natural rather than foreign. That's normal. It's a different environment with different conventions and familiarity. It takes time. But the virtual machine stage is where most people develop either a genuine enthusiasm for Linux or clear-eyed understanding that it's not the right fit for their workflow. Both of those outcomes are valuable. Both of them beat not knowing. If the virtual machine stage produces genuine enthusiasm and you want to experience Linux with full hardware performance, that's when dual booting makes sense. Set up the partition, run the installation, and you've got native Linux with complete hardware access. The performance you experienced in the VM was the ceiling. The native boot is the removal of that ceiling, and your Windows partition is still there, ready whenever you need it. There's one practical consideration that makes the dual boot stage significantly smoother if you address it in advance: data sharing between the two environments. By default, your Linux installation and your Windows installation each have their own file systems, and they don't automatically share files. If you edit a document in Windows and want to access it in Linux, or vice versa, you need a way to bridge that gap. The cleanest solution is creating a shared partition formatted in NTFS, a file system format that both Windows and Linux can read and write natively. You create this partition during the disk partitioning stage of your Linux installation. Point it to a meaningful location in your Linux file system, and store your documents, downloads, media, and project files there. Both environments see the same files. A document you write in Linux is immediately accessible from Windows without copying or transferring anything. The shared partition effectively makes data continuity a non-issue. For browser continuity, your bookmarks, saved passwords, browsing history, every major browser syncs through an account. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, with some configuration. Brave, log into your browser account on the Linux side, and your browsing environment follows you across the operating system boundary. That's one less thing to worry about. One more thing worth saying directly: these timelines are real timelines, not optimistic marketing estimates. The WSL stage, building basic command line familiarity, takes about a week of regular engagement, not a week of 8-hour study sessions. A week of opening the terminal for 30 or 40 minutes a day and actually using it for things. The virtual machine stage, building desktop environment familiarity, takes 2 to 4 weeks before things stop feeling unfamiliar. The dual boot stage doesn't have a fixed timeline because it's an ongoing process of living with Linux and discovering how it fits or doesn't fit your specific needs. The reason I'm being explicit about this is that one of the silent sources of discouragement in Linux exploration is encountering a learning curve that was never disclosed. You watch a video, everything looks smooth and natural, and then you sit down with your own machine, and things take longer and feel harder than you expected. That gap between expectation and reality is avoidable, and the way to avoid it is to set honest expectations before you start. The curve is there. It's manageable. It's worth navigating. But it's real, and pretending otherwise doesn't help you. Here's the thing about the outcome of this exploration. It's genuinely open. The migration narrative has a predetermined ending, You switch to Linux and you're done. But the both and pathway has 3 genuinely valid outcomes, and none of them is the wrong answer. One outcome is that you explore Linux, learn what it offers, and conclude that it doesn't serve your specific needs better than Windows. You've spent a few weeks developing technical skills and understanding. You've got an informed opinion rather than an assumption, and you return to Windows as your primary environment with no regrets and no loss. That's a completely legitimate conclusion. Another outcome is that you find Linux handles most of what you do better than Windows. But there are specific Windows applications or games or tools you're not willing to give up. You settle into a both and configuration permanently. Windows for those specific things, Linux for everything else. Dual booting or running a VM becomes your normal workflow, not a stepping stone. That works. A lot of people live there happily. A third outcome is that Linux earns your primary loyalty through genuine experience rather than advocacy persuasion. You start spending more time in Linux, then significantly more time, then you realize you're only booting into Windows for 1 or 2 specific things, and eventually, maybe not even for those. That migration, if it happens, emerges from your authentic experience rather than a persuasive video telling you it should. It's gradual, it's informed, and it's yours. Any of those 3 outcomes is better than what the migration framings barrier was producing. Continued Windows usage by someone who was curious but got stopped at the door by a choice that was never actually all or nothing. The community's enthusiasm for Linux is earned. The platform genuinely offers things that Windows doesn't. Real control over your computing environment, transparency about what the software is doing, an ecosystem built around the user rather than around the platform's commercial interests, hardware longevity that doesn't get artificially shortened by obsolescence cycles. Those are real advantages. The advocacy isn't wrong about them, but advantages don't require replacement. They can coexist. And the Linux exploration that starts from curiosity and proceeds incrementally, with Windows as a safety net throughout, is far more likely to end in genuine informed adoption than the one that starts with a leap and relies on commitment, overcoming the friction of an unfamiliar environment. You can use Linux without ditching Windows. The pathway is specific, the tools are free, the steps are documented, and the timeline is honest. Start with WSL this week, not next month, not when you have a free weekend to dedicate to it. This week. Enable the feature, open a terminal, and type a few commands. That's the start. Everything else grows from there.